What the monetary reformers of the 1930s said was that if you ran an economy on bank credit, you ran an economy that was inherently unstable. Not only that, you ran an economy that couldn't sell the goods it was capable of producing without constantly producing more. You had poverty amidst plenty in the 1930s. Starvation with goods and food being burnt in the fields. People wanted to work, but the industries and the farms couldn't employ them because nobody was buying the goods. You had a circular collapse of the economy, and this was the primary claim of monetary reformers. However, it led on from there. Now, if you have large mortgage debts registered against a population, what happens to your disposable income? It's severely reduced. At the same time, if you have large debts registered against commerce, what happens to the price of goods? They're elevated. Now, if you have costs and prices elevated by debt and disposable income reduced by debt, what sort of goods prosper in that environment? Are they going to be cheap goods and shoddy goods? And by this debt-based money supply system, we have introduced into the economy a very, very damaging bias in favour of cheap produce. Monetary reform is often presented as a matter of debt statistics, as if it's something frozen in time that you should look at and disapprove. But an economy isn't a static entity. It's constantly evolving. It's a dynamic. And if we introduce into an economy a bias in favour of cheap goods, it has the most profound effect. If you have an economy where prices are elevated by debt and people's incomes are reduced, that's you not being able to buy the goods that you might like to buy, and those goods anyway being overpriced. You have a bias in favour of cheap goods. How do you produce cheap goods? What have we given an advantage to? Mass production. The best way to get goods cheap is to produce them in bulk, centralised, and bulk produce them and bulk transport them throughout an economy. We have introduced a costing bias, and it's a defect in the free market pricing mechanism that favours mass production, and that automatically favours centralisation and gives an advantage to large companies. Now, the result of that is, of course, that over the years, studies have been done, certainly in the UK, which have shown that the durability of goods has been going down year on year. We now make kettles, which we throw away after 6 months, so we can make them again, because they're cheaper. If you make goods cheap, people will buy them. It's almost synonymous with improved methods within the economy these days. Improved methods means producing something as cheaply as possible. You put a gadget or gizmo on it, you put an extra flashing light, you put a sexy lead on it, you give it a new shape, but the thing only lasts 6 months. Not only does it mean that goods are of very poor durability, and we have to keep producing them to supply an economy, which also knocks onto transport. It also means that people's lives are being consumed in a pointless, repetitive manufacture and supply of goods. Cars, which used to be produced for 30 or 40 years, now have a life expectancy of a decade. They're the second most expensive item that we produce or buy, and we can't be bothered to make them to last longer than a decade on average. It's a hideous waste of resources, and that's why monetary reform impinges directly on environmentalism, the use and good husbandry of the world's resources. Economics is supposed to be about the efficient use of resources. That is obviously a blatant example of the inefficient use of resources. Let me give you another one. I did a study of UK farming. Now, I'm pretty sure the same is true in Canada, but certainly in the United States and in the United Kingdom, Farming is one of the most heavily indebted sectors of the economy. And the pattern has been the same in every case. The farms to go under are the small farms and the medium-sized farms. And the farms that survive are the large farms, which can bulk produce and bulk supply cheap food to supermarkets who sell cheap food of low nutritional value to a population who just don't have quite enough money to sanction better quality goods. Now, can you see that by introducing this bias in favour of cheapness and a burden of debt on efficient producers, it introduces distortions into an economy that have the deepest ramifications? What sort of food do people want to eat? It's good food. What sort of food can the land provide? Good food. Which are the most efficient farms at producing it? Medium-sized enterprises. A balance of arable and cereal crops and livestock. Dispersed around the countryside where people are dispersed. Farming is the most natural and sustainable activity in an economy, and yet we now are talking about sustainable farming. Sustainable farming, it should be the most obvious thing, like putting one leg in front of another. But we have driven farming to the point where the buyers, suppliers, the selling networks, the retailing networks, and the farmers who survive, all of them survive by driving at low cost. But we've got plenty of land. We want good food. There's even unemployment if we're talking about extra people on the land. But we have tipped the balance because of a debt-funded economy. Now, that's not the only ramification that comes from running an economy on debt. If you have an economy that's run on debt, there is great difficulty experienced by commerce in selling its goods because its goods are pushed up in price and people have low disposable incomes. So there is a competition, a constant competition to get your goods, the ones that are bought, and others squeezed out. Well, advertising is now essential to any firm wanting to compete in a large economy. Advertising and marketing now occupies, I believe it's 18 to 20% of the American economy. What a waste. And talk about making kettles for the pleasure of making them again, and cars, and eating junk food. We also have 18% of our economy devoted to persuading you want something that you haven't got the brains to work out without having the images flashed in front of you. Psychological manipulation of your emotions, and particularly our children's, is a direct route through you, through your children to you, to your wallet, to get things to sell. We all go for this, and we also, yes, we must have this, because we are at the rough end of the stick, and we accept the need for this employment, because if we don't have a job, we're out of our mortgaged house. So we say, yes, I'll make that, I'll take a job in that factory, and we turn a blind eye to what we're making, to the fact that we're making gim-crack, shoddy products, or we're making something quite speculatively that nobody has ever thought they wanted, to be backed up by a team of emotional manipulators who will hopefully get it across to the public and keep you in a job, because we all need a job. You know what they used to talk about in the 1930s? The coming age of leisure. They used to talk about it in the 1960s as well. The microchip was going to bring it. It laid off tens of thousands of secretaries overnight. But they had to be re-employed. And so we have a spiral supporting the growth and drive of the economy, backed up not just by debt figures, but by the fact that since individuals are in debt, they must have a job. And so the economy constantly grows, and everybody agrees with it. It's an economic express train to nowhere.